and you'll probably get a little indication come up on the bottom of the screen saying that this session is being recorded. Okay, so moving on, in terms of what the aims of this session are, really it's as I've laid out here. First of all, I'm going to talk about how we actually set up groups in Moodle. Secondly, how to set up a group assignment in Moodle. And then thirdly, we're going to look at it in terms of how we actually mark a group assignment. And I'll aim to try and show you it from obviously the lecturer's perspective in terms of how they would do that, but also in terms of what the student sees as well, or the student groups see as well. Okay, so that's what the aims of this session are. In terms of how I'm going to do it is really I'm going to go actually into a live Moodle and show you how it's actually done. So it will just take a couple of seconds for me just to load up Moodle, and you should be able to see probably on your screens now in terms of your screen now, hopefully you'll be able to see. Hopefully you'll be able to see now the Moodle site. I'm going to go into a test course where I've set up a little test site, and if I go in here, this is what a typical Moodle site looks like before it's being populated. So you're probably very, very familiar with this. We've got announcements at the top of the page, and there's not much content in here at the moment. It just goes from week 1 to week 10. In terms of what we're going to do today then, it's really setting up assignments. Group assignments is really a two-stage process. So the first stage is to actually put your students into groups, and then the second stage is to actually set up the group assignments. So let's have a look at the first stage first, of putting your students into groups. So to do so, you need to scroll down the page, and you'll see on the left hand side, usually on the bottom left hand side of the page, you'll see a box called Administration. And if you scroll down a little bit further, you'll see then a link that says Users. Click on the Users link, and then the drop down you will see the link to Groups. So click on Groups, and this is where we actually set up the groups in your Moodle module. There's two main ways of doing this. We can auto-create groups. If I click on that, what it does is Moodle actually creates the groups for you, actually randomly puts students into the groups for you. It's very useful maybe where you haven't actually allocated them into groups, and quite often we do that in quite sort of large classes quite often. What I'm going to show you though is how to manually create the groups. I mean, I think this is probably a little bit more realistic in terms of the way our teaching is operated at LSBU, is that quite often we do know our students and we've put them into groups before we actually come into Moodle. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So to create groups, it's fairly obviously that we click on the button that says Create Group. So if I click on that button there, we get an option here. So I've got some dummy students in this module here, so I'm going to create 3 groups, and it's up to you what you want to call them. So I'm just going to call this Red Group, and you can write in the description there of who's in the group as well if you wanted to. It gives you the option to give you an enrollment key, but I'm not going to use that, and to upload the documents with it. So I'm just going to keep things simple and just click Save Changes. So you can see I've created my first group, a red group, which I've called a red group. Okay, so to create similar groups, similar process. So create a blue group, save changes, and I'll create a third group, and I'll call that, say, a yellow group. And again, to say, you can put description or anything else you want into these sections here and save changes. Okay, so that's the first step really, is to create the groups that we're going to put our students into. Now we need to actually populate these groups with the students. So to do so, we can see on the right hand side of the page we've got an additional column, and at the bottom, highlighted in blue, we've got add / remove users. So if I click on here, what appears now is a list of all the participants who are in this module. So you can see there's me, myself as the lecturer, and then below that we've got 4 students. So to put a student into a group, and we're going to put them into this blue group, I click on the student I want to put into the group. It highlights, so it's obviously gone blue here, and then I click on the add button at the top. And as you can see, it's transferred now into the blue group. So we've got 1 student into this particular group. And similarly, I can actually populate the other groups. So I highlight the group that I want. So this is the red group. I'm now going to put the second student in there, highlight it, add, and then go back to the third group. Again, highlight the yellow group, add or remove users, and this time what I'm going to do is add the last 2 students. So I've clicked on student 3. I'm going to press down the control button and actually highlight number 4 as well. So I'm going to transfer 2 students over into this final group. So I've allocated all the students into the 3 different groups. And you can see that now, it gives you a summary of it. So blue group, 1 member, red group, 1 student, yellow group, 2 students. So they've all been distributed and allocated into a group. The second thing then that we need to do is look at what are called groupings. So groups are the individual students that we've put into the groups. Groupings is what Moodle calls a collection of groups. So this is useful, for example, when we have maybe 2 or more lecturers in a Moodle module, so that we wanted a group assignment for 1 lecturer and then another group assignment for a second lecturer. Or it might be, for example, we have 1 lecturer who teaches a daytime class and they might have an evening class, so you might want to set up a daytime group assignment and an evening group assignment, or similarly a weekday one or a weekend one. So I'm going to again show you how this works as well. This is how groupings work, so it'll hopefully come a bit clearer as I set them up. So first of all, if I create a grouping, I'm going to click on the blue button at the bottom where it says create grouping. I'm going to create 2 groupings. So I'm going to create one for well. You could put a description in there as well. So I'll save for changes. So you can now see I've got 1 grouping called Chris Rowell. I'm going to come and create another group, and I'm just going to make up a name and call it, I don't know, Fred Smith. And if we wanted to, could put a description in here. So now I've created 2 groupings. So what we need to do next is put the actual groups which we've created here into these groupings. So to do so, to actually put 2 groups, 2 or more groups into my class, Chris's class, I'm going to click on the right hand side below where it says edit. It says show, if I hover over that little icon at the end, it says show groups in grouping. So I click on there. And what it allows me to do now is similar how we put students into group. Now we can put groups into groupings. So what I'm going to do now is, again, I'm going to select the blue group, hold down the control key and select the red group and add them now into my class, Chris Rowell's class. And again, for Fred's class, I'm going to do the same thing. What I'm going to do now is click on the icon at the end. I'm going to select the yellow group and add that into Fred's class, and then back to groupings. So overall then, in summary, is that I've put my students into 3 different groups, and then I've created 2 groupings, one for Chris's class and one for Fred's class. And as you can see, Chris's class has got the blue group of students and the red group of students, and Fred's class has got the yellow group. Okay, alright, so that all of that is putting the students into groups. The second bit is a little bit easier, is actually now creating the assignment, the group assignment. So what I need to do now is come back into the module. So I'm going to go back over to the top. I'm going to click the name of the module. Now, as you can see, what I've done is I've actually created a section at the top called Group Assignment. And I'm going to put the assignments into this section here. Now, it's up to you where you put your group assignment, obviously, into the module, but I strongly recommend that you put it somewhere that's very obvious. So obviously I don't think a student coming into this would not mistake where to go in terms of looking for their group assignment. I've labelled it very clearly. So to create the assignments, which you're probably a bit more familiar with, is to turn editing on, and then I want to create the 2 assignments under this section, group assignment. So first of all, I click on to add an activity. To add an assignment, I click the top box and then click add at the bottom. And after a couple of seconds, this loads. So what I'm going to do now is create 2 group assignments, one for Chris's class and one for Fred's class. So again, you need to label it clearly. So group assignment Chris Rowell's class. So the students would quite clearly know who that is. I mean, assuming that they would know the name of the lecturer. Maybe at the start of term that's not obviously the case, but you maybe need to put maybe a bit more of a description in there as well. And if you do, make sure you click that box at the bottom. Right, now we've got all the normal settings that you would expect on any assignment. So I'm not going to go through all of these settings, I'm just going to look at the group of settings, but obviously the first thing to do is make sure that the due date is correct. So I'm just going to stick with this allocated due date on the 2nd of May, but then I'm going to scroll down and have a look at the group submission settings. So that's about halfway down, and you can see group submission settings. I'm going to click on there and I get a drop down box. Right, we need to change some of these settings. So the first one says students submit in groups. The default setting is in no, so we need to change this to yes. Okay, so I've changed it to yes. Next, the next 2 options now turn from grey to dark black. So what we need to do now is look at these 3 settings. So the first one says require group to make submission. So I would click this to yes. So what this means is that they can submit drafts, but actually when they're ready to submit, they click a button that submits their work for marking. The next one says require all group members submit. My recommendation is that you probably need to keep this at no. What this means obviously is that only one of the group members would need to submit their work. You're not asking for all the group members to submit their work. Okay, so that's probably how you want it, just one group member would submit their work. And then finally it says groupings for student groups. So I click on the drop down, and then we see the two groupings that we set up earlier. So as I said before, this is the class settings for Chris Rao's assignment, i.e. my assignment. So I'm going to select Chris Rao for the groupings of this particular assignment. And those are the settings that you need to change basically for the group assignments. I'm not going to go into the other settings there, we don't have time, but obviously we've got to turn it in settings as well. Once you're happy with all of those, especially the due dates, you click Save and Return to Course at the bottom. And after a couple of seconds, you can see now we've created the assignment, group assignment, Chris Rao's class. So just as a good way of just highlighting that again, I'll create a second group assignment for Fred's class. So click on Assignment, Add, make sure you've clearly labelled Fred Smith's class, and any possible description you maybe want to add in there. If you want to attach a file, again we've got a due date, double check the due date is correct, and then the crucial settings again are the ones for group submission settings, so we need to change these again. So students submitting groups, yes. Require students to make submissions, yes. Require all group members submit, I'll leave that as no. And then this is Fred's class, so I'm going to choose Fred Smith's grouping to attach to this assignment. Again, that's relatively quick. Once I'm happy with all of those settings, I click on Save and Return to Course at the bottom. Okay, so this is what it looks like if I turn the editing off. Go back in. We can now see there are two group assignments that have been set up. So that's the whole process of actually setting it up. Secondly, we want to see what it looks like in terms of from a student's perspective. So what I'm going to do now is that, as you can see, I'm logged in as myself in this particular module. What I'm going to do now is log out and then log in as one of the students to see it from their perspective. So okay, so this takes me back in, and because this student is enrolled in the module where I've just set it up, they'll see it exactly the same initially anyway. So they see the heading group assignment, and they can see the two options. If I click on the first one, you can see Chris Rao's class. There is actually nowhere for the students to actually submit this piece of work. The reason being is because I've actually gone in as a student 3 who's actually in Fred's class. So they can't actually submit to the wrong area even if they tried. So what I'm going to do now is click on Fred's class, the yellow group, and actually you can now see there's an Add a Submission button. So when the group is ready to submit, they would click on Add Submission, and this is the normal way that students would add a file, a document, a Word document, or anything like that. So they choose the file. I've got a spare one in my assignments folder, so I'm just going to choose this one, go OK. You can see it's, and then it's uploaded, and then the student says save changes, and you can see it's turned the colors to the submission status has changed. It's submitted now as a draft, and students could carry on submitting drafts by editing and uploading their submissions by using this blue button here. Once the group is actually happy that they've finished their assignment, they'll be ready to hand in their piece of work for marking. So they choose the second option, hand in my submission, so they click on that button there. They need to specify that their work is their own work, so they tick the box and then go continue. And again, you can see the submission status has changed, the colouring has changed, so it's gone green, and it tells the student the work has been submitted for grading. Okay, so that's the group submission that's now gone into Fred's class. What I want to do now is go back into Moodle, but this time again as the lecturer, and find that submission and then mark it. So what I'm going to do now is log out. So I'm going to log out as a student, and I'm going to log back in, this time again as myself. Okay, go back to the module, go back to the assignment, and it was Fred's class that the student submitted their work to. So to retrieve that assignment, we go click on here, click on view all submissions, and we can see now actually in this view for Fred Smith's class, we can see that there have been 2 submissions. They're highlighted green and they're ready for grading or marking. So to mark it, what we need to do is select one of the students' pieces of work. So I'm going to click on grade, and this is the normal grading method. So and there are various ways you can definitely use this, but I'll go through all the various options. Wouldn't necessarily do them in this order, but I'll go through them on the page. So let's say we've looked at the student's piece of work, we've assessed it, we've maybe added comments to it, and we're ready to upload it and give them feedback to the students. So this particular student's work, I'm going to give it a mark of 67. I'm going to release it straight away to the students. You probably wouldn't necessarily do this. You'd maybe mark all the groups before you would feed back those grades, but I'm just going to, for the sake of purposes, so that you can see what it looks like, put released. It gives you a box to give overall feedback, so I'm just going to type in something here. So overall assignments done, and it gives you the option to actually re-upload maybe a document if you've downloaded it and put comments on the original piece of work that was submitted. So again, I've taken the original document and added some comments, so I'm going to upload that. But the final thing is, you can see now we've got a new bit at the bottom of the page where it says group submission settings. Because this is a group assignment, it says apply grades and feedback to entire group, and a box by default is tick yes. So even though I've marked this for one student, it's going to give all the other students in that group the same grade. So I'm going to go save changes. And go OK. Okay, so if I now go back and have a look at the full grade of this particular module, we can now see this is student 3 that I marked. So you can see they can now, the grade is 67 out of 100. They have had a file uploaded where they go back and get any comments. They've got an overall comment which is in the feedback comments, and sorry, that's the file where they will have the original document and any comments that you've put with it. Also, you can see, because student 4 is in the same group, what it's done now is give the student the same mark. So they've got 67, they've got the same overall feedback, they've got the same file with comments, and they've got the same grade. So we've gone through really the whole process now from beginning to end, showing you how the marking process actually takes place, and the way we've set it up, it gives feedback to the whole group as a group assignment as well. I suppose the last thing now would to just go back in and show it from the student's perspective. So again, it doesn't seem to take too long, so I'm conscious of time. Been speaking now for just over 25 minutes, so I'll quickly just go back in as a student, and we can see the feedback they receive. So this time I've gone in as student 4, so actually this was the other group member of the yellow group. So even though I marked the groups, the student number 3, student number 4 is receiving the same feedback and grade. So they're getting 67 out of 100 overall feedback, and the file with the comments at the end. Okay, so it is relatively easy process once you've set up the groups in terms of the overall procedure of setting up group assignments. Okay, I'll just finally log back in. I think I've really shown the whole process from beginning to end in terms of setting up the assignment. So just to summarize in one sentence, first of all, set up the groups in the administration box under users, go to groups, and then once you've done that, you can go to where you actually want to set the assignment up, and then actually set the assignment up and attach the groups. Alright, that's it in terms of the demonstration. If I go back, and I'll just bring up a couple more slides before we end up. So hopefully you can see the slides now as opposed to the actual live demo. If you need, if you're going to do this, what I'd recommend, probably initially if you haven't done it before, is to do quite a few staff guides that show you how this process works. So first of all in terms of setting up groups, and then secondly in terms of actually setting up assignments. So you should have, everybody will have access how to guide for Moodle, which is on the home page within the VLE Moodle. If you click on there, there's some guides and some videos that will take you through the process. Okay, in terms of future weeks webinars, next week's one we'll be looking at anonymous marking in Moodle, and then we have 2 more scheduled. Moodle site health check, which is really look at what should really go into a Moodle module, and then finally we'll be looking at getting ready for the next semester in terms of setting up and transferring information from one module over to another. Okay, as I said before, here are my contact details. That's my email address, ralc@lsbu.ac.uk, so you can maybe take that down, and if you've got any queries, yeah, I'm happy to answer any emails or send you any further guides that you might need. I'll leave the chat room open for a few minutes before we shut down, but thank you for participating, and Have a good day.